Good day, folks. It's a pleasure to share my views with you this morning. Today, I want to talk about the ability of a nonprofit organization to secure funding in the current environment. My view is that the environment for fundraising has become rather competitive, and that's based on the fact that there's an increase in the number of nonprofits, as well as an increase in the scope of current nonprofits, meaning that current nonprofits are increasing their scope to accommodate opportunities, um, ensuring that they are sustainable in the short term. One can then argue where does this leave their operational ability? Um, well, I have created 5 elements that I think addresses 2 things. One is an ability to secure recurring income, and number 2, an ability to create an operational ability that augments um, a core service delivery competence, as opposed to be trying to operate as a all-inclusive corporate or business organization. Um, let's see how I unpacked it. Uh, the first thing that I believe that an NPO should do in the immediate term is to create a brand around itself. Create a brand that stands for certain virtues, that stands for whatever values the founders, the managers, and the directorship of the nonprofit stand for. Um, I believe a brand that is properly thought through, well positioned, will contribute to an ability to stand out. Once again, when I think of these things, these abilities that I am going to discuss now, I believe that any NPO is better served by partnering with organizations that can present it with the appropriate skills, as opposed to trying to create an ability to demonstrate that it has the brand that is required for people to trust, for people to invest into, for funders to consider. I, I, I stand for brand development that is supported by external expertise, and mainly because I believe that NPOs should not create a recurring increased cost structure. I believe it must create a cost structure that can be moved around in line with its income. The second thing I thought that's important to consider is the fundraising methodology that NPOs apply. I know there are a number of conventional approaches. I do believe that a lot of NPOs have become reliant on one or two funders, whilst others have a more ad hoc approach to this. My view is that in the modern world, as we know it, people, organizations have to focus on their own cash flows, and from an organizational perspective, an organization may want to use its corporate social investment funding and create methodologies or an approach that does not include necessarily NPOs that are in existence, but may come up with ideas around creating something that will make the business stand out. So therefore, the space between the boundaries between corporates that have the ability to fund social investment projects and NPOs have kind of decreased, and that means that a nonprofit may be in many ways competing with a corporate organization to deliver a certain set of benefits to a defined group of people. So that means that non-profits don't necessarily sit on the minds of those that sit on these budgets. They may find routes and means to deliver these benefits without using non-profits. When we look at individuals, individuals would rather pay a recurring type of income for a set of benefits that they believe they are scoring by partnering with an NPO. And these need to be based on segmentation, if you like. One has to look at what's affordable from a disposable income perspective. One also has to look at what is current and what would make individuals feel good about themselves when they consider to give others who are reliant on income through non-profit organizations or for welfare purposes. My idea is that through a structure of recurring income, non-profits move away from the dependency they have on big funders, corporates. A recurring income type of fundraising allows them to link up with a group of people that they properly segmented, a group of people that share the values of the nonprofit, and therefore the acceptance of changes in any type of beneficiary work that needs to be done is easier. Relationships are found on shared values and are not institutionally driven. And I'm all for fundraising of a recurring nature. And this is all possible through modern technology. All that the nonprofit sector has to do is open itself up. If you look at the technology that's available, you don't need to go into expensive development, IT development. What you need to do is open yourself up to platforms that are available. Plant your course into those abilities, into the network that you have, and then focus on your core ability. Focus on your core ability, combine that with the brand, make it easy for people to invest on a monthly basis, and use technology and platforms, social media platforms and so on, to keep people updated and excited about their commitment to fund you as an NPO for a very specific cause. I also think that it's important to communicate and share any changes in scope of work, and to be active in talking and associate these or link the ongoing talks to what you regard as your brand, a brand that can be trusted. So I think these two things, a brand that stands out in a crowd, a fundraising ability that's modern, and an ability to talk through this through the modern technology will contribute to a recurring type of income for the non-profit sector. A third thing that I think is important to consider in the short term is an ability to increase your expertise in your core function and reduce operational support to an outsourced item. In that way, the expenses that you carry to execute the project does not become permanent expenses and do not necessarily have to go beyond the agreed period. So rather work with fairly priced and experts to support the work around implementation of projects, so that you as an NPO can focus on your core expertise. Mind you, that is why people give you the money. People do not give you the money to demonstrate that you a corporate, efficient and effective with systems and tools, and that they give you the money to demonstrate that you can give benefit to those who are in need, that you serve as the objective. Now, in order to be efficient, effective in that regard, you don't need to own the resources. You can partner with associates, partners, consultants that can give you the expertise. Just build in the cost into the project cost. I think it makes a lot of sense for me. I've worked in a number of nonprofits where a project starts up. You go through a significant recruitment drive. You hire quite rapidly a number of people to give operational support, and you don't necessarily ensure that there's a career for them because it's all project driven. After 2 years or so, you just see how people have to exit your NPO into the world of unemployment. I think that is rather unfair. I think the onus rests on the nonprofits that receive funding to deliver certain projects to ensure that projects are delivered efficiently and effectively without increasing the burden of permanent cost, but also to ensure that there's a level of humanity involved in the things that you do to get to deliver the beneficiary commitments. I'm not in support of wild recruitment to satisfy an immediate need. That needs to be replaced by a strategic approach that looks at, number one, capacity building without increasing permanent cost burdens. Number two, an ability to remain focused on your core abilities. That is why people give you the money in the first place. And number three, not to damage and people's hopes by recruiting unnecessary people and then letting them go after 2 years or when your funding gets withdrawn. You'll find that, to be honest, in some of the nonprofits where I worked, recruitment is done so rapidly that many things have to happen before the newly appointed staff members find their way. Firstly, they have to kind of commit, adjust to a culture. They have to get used to one another. They have to get used to the tools and the methodologies that are applied. Now, you may feel that I'm against the creation of employment. I'm not against it. Maybe one can have an approach where you partner for operational support purposes with a specific organization for implementation purposes, and you demonstrate to your funders that a level of funding will go into skills development. Therefore, you create a pool of people that you would want to develop as part of the 2-year project, without having a negative impact on the efficiency of the operational support. So you bring in a company that already has a culture, that already has skilled people that are used to working with one another, that already has systems that you plug into your project, and you create an element of skills development into which funding gets transferred, and you declare that to your funder. In that way, it's a win-win. The beneficiaries get serviced in time. The project targets are met. The funder is happy. You do not carry operational burden from one project to another. The people who have come in and who benefited from the skill development exit at a point in time. They don't become a permanent responsibility. Long gone are the days when numbers of people demonstrate the strength of an organization. An NPO is at its best when it focuses on its core ability. Therefore, decisions have to be taken around how best to get the required operational support and how best to demonstrate that there's skills transfer or development of people happening while the project is running, and that should be seen as the social investment aspect of the project. The third thing I wanted to talk about is how to develop a sustainable model for your NPO. Now, I find that a lot of organizations and a lot of NPOs attempt to develop a sustainable model that will outlast a current income stream from a big funder. And that is, you have signed up to an organization like USAID, you get a few $100,000 or whatever the amount is, and that is secured for 2 years, and that increases your income. And so now you want to use this funding to create a sustainable model beyond the 2 years. It doesn't work like that. You have to know what is your investment approach before you get the funding. And you need to use current projects to fund that investment approach. In that way, you're creating an ability that will allow you to have a business that runs beyond the funding projects that you have currently. Too many nonprofits want to use current funder money to create a sustainable project. This sustainability of the nonprofit needs to be determined in strategy and structure by a group of people who are interested in ensuring that the NPO will outlast current projects. It cannot be determined by the funding that you get from current funders, because that will only get you into compliance problems. So best to sit down, think about what it is that you want to do as an NPO to secure your own future without looking at the money that you're getting currently. The last thing on my list that I thought may make a big difference in how you stand out amongst a crowd of competing nonprofits is by signing up to the highest level of accreditation that you can get. Accreditation that will verify your compliance to standards, compliance to accounting, whatever it is. You need to demonstrate that you are an organization that's compliant, that's compliance orientated, and you can show that on paper if you can, some certification around it, demonstrate an ability over a period of time of reports that show that you you are serious about compliance. And I know that compliance speak a lot to what is regarded as creating a sustainable model. But I do believe that if, like I said earlier, if your model around sustainability is planned, you will not find yourself in muddy waters around compliance. So just to repeat, my advice is as follows. For a non-profit organization to stand out in a crowd of competing NPOs, competing for funding, obviously, number one, develop a brand. Number two, apply modern digital fundraising abilities and communication abilities. Basically go digital on those. Thirdly, ensure that you do not build unnecessary cost burdens in your implementation approach. Basically outsource, if you can, the operational expertise required. 3, develop a sustainable model outside your current funding. It must be strategic. It can't be led by the funding that you currently receiving from whatever funder you involved with. And number 5, my last point, ensure that you can demonstrate a long history of compliance. Have a compliance orientation that can be validated by whoever needs to have a look, by whoever needs to consider you. In that way, I think you will meet many standards out there, and you will maximize your presence. You will secure funding at levels above those of your funders, competitors. I do think that is, once you have these 5 things in place, it frees up the owners or the key stakeholders within your NPO to go out like corporate CEOs and play a role in stakeholder management, identify stakeholders, start relationships, spend time on executing the sustainability model that you would want to have, spend time on and demonstrating that you are the brand that you want people to see. It frees the key stakeholders up if you apply the 5 things that I mentioned. Thank you for listening, and I do hope that I contributed to your thinking. I do hope that this will lead to some meaningful discussions and hopefully create some meaningful interventions. Thank you. I look forward to talking to you next time. Bye.